Looking at some islands today, the island collection of Kiribati, a pretty cool location in the world. Look at these amazing pictures of these different islands and atolls. I thought this one was particularly cool, the different shapes and colors. Lagoons, I suppose. I thought this was really almost out of this world, the different colors that I saw on these islands. These islands are in danger from climate change from a rising sea level. And I did throw those into the rising seawater indicator chart that I do have. This is Tarawa, I suppose, the capital island. And look at that, all the red bits will be underwater by, well, that's 22,130. But if we go back to 2050, see how much red we get when that generates. Should take just a moment. Yeah, still quite a significant amount of the coast being, yeah, underwater. And we will take a look at some of these islands because they are like even this stretch here. I'll show this to you on the Apple Maps in a minute. A lot of these places are really quite vulnerable to being submerged. If we quickly go back over here, I think I have it open. This is the same island of Tarawa, I believe. Um, Look at some of these stretches. So these are like elevations, whether they're from volcanic activity. These atolls, of course, are created with all sorts of different moments, I suppose, in the creation of volcanoes. A lot of the time, the volcanoes bring up lava, and then the islands are left over as the lava cools. Not sure if that's the case for this particular atoll, but that's definitely the case for a lot of the islands in the Pacific. And you just have these different elevations. So you can see here how this has been connected by a form of causeway, um, the bridge connecting the different parts of the island. So this causeway itself seems to be okay, according to the indicator, but it's actually the bits where the people live that are going to be submerged below annual flood level, according to this climatecentral.org website. Quite an amazing website that they have there. Look at the different housing units that are going to be exposed. So this is quite a big problem going forward for quite a lot of people. This is one of the least developed countries in the world, doesn't have a lot of income, doesn't really have probably the local finances to deal with this sort of problem. And it's also quite difficult. Like, what are you going to do? Are you going to ship all these people to different places, or can you make it actually livable for them on the island? That would be the best, and there will be some method of doing that. There have been a few different examples. If I go back to, I think I had a page open. This was a Telegraph article. I didn't read too much into it, but okay, I don't know. This is a little bit over the top, but there are some ideas on how there could be a possible way to save the sinking state of Kiribati. It's right in the middle of the Pacific, as you can see there, between a whole bunch of islands. It's actually a collection of different islands. I did have a second map open for that. You can kind of see it here from this ResearchGate picture. There's the Gilbert Islands, the Phoenix Islands, and the Line Islands. Different islands located at quite a big distance across the area from each other. Um, yeah, let's look a little bit more closely here. Again, we have kind of a runway to land in the main capital island. Big arrows there, it's pretty cool. This, I wasn't too sure what these are. It reminded me of places where you can trap seawater and then you can let the water evaporate and have salt afterwards. But I don't know if that is what this actually is in this case. Wasn't entirely certain, but definitely interesting bits of infrastructure around that area. You can kind of see not too many houses here. There is a bit, but it's not too densely populated. A kind of a main road network goes south, and then here is where the population starts to kick up a lot, and it gets more and more intense. Interesting complex here. Some form of industrial area, perhaps, or some shopping areas with big sheds, and you can see those houses going right along. All of this under the threat of water. So I thought that was definitely worth pointing out as we continue this video. It is a desperately beautiful part of the world. These atolls, these lagoons are really quite amazing. Look at the pier here. I thought it was also quite nice. Fishing is quite important. Quite a lot of boats in this area as well. The original people, of course, were seafaring people who arrived, and I have a little bit on the history, which we will go into as well in a minute. Look at those boats. Quite cool. Yeah, of course, they need to be able to deal with quite rough seas in the Pacific. Look at that. Yeah, amazing images of the various vessels. And here, of course, is the harbour that I was mentioning, and some container. So you can imagine that probably the harbour is almost more important there than the actual airport for bringing in supplies. There is a lot of exports and imports of fish materials in terms of the exports anyway. Here we go, the economy. Um, let's see, I think it was a lot going to Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines. We have tuna, fish, ships, which that was interesting. Some development of shipping, perhaps coconut oil. But yeah, mostly fish products. Thailand, Indonesia, Philippines, Japan, South Korea, all big countries who like fish, of course. Import goods, also the actual vessels for getting the fish, beef, nets, which makes a lot of sense, poultry, rice, petroleum to run the ships and generators on the island, of course, from China, Taiwan, Fiji, Australia, and New Zealand. I thought that was pretty interesting. Yeah, there is quite a bit on these about how the economies are quite definitely not so developed for sure. Kind of in line with a lot of African countries. There's Afghanistan is there as well, Bangladesh, I believe. Quite a few countries on that list, and this is one of the ones that are quite reliant on international aid. Currency, Australian dollar. You can see there. I think there's also a local currency. I thought there was a local currency as well. It's interesting. Religions are interesting too. A lot of Christianity, Catholic, and the Uniting Church, which is a Protestant church on the island, 25,000 members. I thought that was quite interesting as well. Two languages, English and Gilbertese. I think a guy called Gilbert was one of the first guys from the Western Hemisphere to discover the island, and hence the Gilbert Islands and whatnot. I will read out some of the history from some of these places too. As an island nation vulnerable to climate change, addressing climate change has been an essential part of the international policy. Oops, let's close that. Yeah, as a member of the Alliance of Small Island States. So quite often you hear these speeches at like UN summits about this sort of stuff. This is also quite interesting about the actual history. So we go back up here. It was initially inhabited by Austronesian people speaking the same oceanic language. This is a 3000 BCE. The area was not completely isolated. Voyagers from Samoa, Tonga, Fiji introduced other Polynesian cultural aspects into the islands. Mass departure occurred from Samoa, and a lot of those people ended up on these islands as well. Civil war became a factor between these different factions. Acquisition of land being the main form of conquest. Clans and chiefs began fighting over resources. A lot of blood feuds, hatreds, yeah, continuing for a very long time into the European era, I suppose, when the European visitors and the colonial era started, which led to certain islands decimating their foes with help of guns and cannons equipped from Europeans. However, the typical military arms of the island were still shark-toothed embedded wooden spears, knives, and swords, again highlighting how dangerous sharks are. But yeah, their teeth were being used. Basically, there was a certain sense of pride to using these weapons rather than the newer weapons. Sentimental value of the equipment handed down through generations. Bow, slings, javelins. Were seldom used, but hand-to-hand combat was a prominent skill still practiced today, though seldom mentioned because of various taboos associated with it, secrecy being the primary one. I thought that was a bit of an interesting one, like hand-to-hand combat still being used today. That was a bit curious. Yeah, chance visits by European ships occurred in the 17th and 18th centuries, while those ships were trying to do navigations all around the world, and they ended up basically landing on these islands. It was also pretty interesting. A bit of a sad part here too was a passing trade whaling the on the lying grounds and labor ships associated with coercive labor recruitment practice known as blackbirding. Blackbirding is kind of where people are coerced into or being kidnapped to work as slaves or poorly paid laborers in countries distant from their native land. So quite sad history there as well. There was another quite interesting part of history about the Tarara. I'm so bad at pronunciations on these videos, but I'll keep going. Island. There was an interesting bit. Before we get to the history, temperatures are pretty high, so that's the record high. They're 35 degrees throughout the year. Every single month, they're right on the equator, basically. The mean daily maximum, 30, yeah, 31. Daily mean 28. I mean, like, that is just crazy how hot that is throughout the day, so regularly. In Ireland, we're lucky to get 21 ever. I think we've had 33 degrees like a couple of times in my lifetime. But yeah, look at that 28 throughout the entire time. Record lows at 21. Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. But I want to go back into the history a small bit. This was an interesting story. In the Caribbean's mythology, Turara was the earth when the land, ocean, and sky not being cleaved yet by Nahara the spider. Thus, after calling the sky and the ocean, he called a piece of rock. Yeah, so the sky was Karara and the ocean was Mara, and thus the island itself was Tarara, which I thought was pretty cool. They created the rest of the islands and also in Kiribati and Samoa, yeah, and so on and so forth. different bits of carbon dating, trying to get back how long people had been there for, 200 BC, things like that. And here's the bit about Gilbert. Thomas Gilbert, captain of the East India Company vessel Charlotte, was the first European to describe the island in 1788. He did not land at the time. Yeah, and then there was these warring factions again, House of Aotubu and the House of T-Bike until 1892, with Captain proclaiming the island was now a British protectorate. Yeah, so when the English arrived, this kind of apparently halted some of the fighting at the time, with a massacre having saved the Aotubu from a massacre the day before. Yeah, they had been badly defeated by T-Bike. So basically, there's just always war going on there. And also, we go back to World War II. It was occupied by the Japanese. A lot of people died. 6,000 people died in total in fighting between the US and the Japanese on the island as well. All interesting stuff, but quite sad about the war stuff. In terms of demographics, quite a nice pyramid there. They have the fertility rate. I don't know. I'll quickly just double check. It might be here somewhere. Total fertility rate 2.25, 3.3, so relatively high compared to the European standards, but has been dropping off a bit. You see this kind of pyramid shape, and then it kind of has been cutting off in the last 10 years, I suppose, quite a bit, but still relatively healthy population. But of course, they could probably do with depopulating, reducing the people on the island in order to avoid the negative effects of this rising sea tide. Yeah, which is really a huge problem for that community. In terms of, okay, I need to change that. Kiribati, quite low in the doing business, 164, probably not a lot of business to be done there, but quite free, 90 on the Freedom Index, so free elections, fair elections being held there apparently, according to the Freedom House Index. Wasn't an awful lot of economic data, nothing there on inflation I could find here that quickly. Of course, they're using the Australian dollar, I suppose, so it probably is like using the US dollar. Yeah, dust temperature was a big thing that kind of, again, was really obvious when I was looking at that particular indicator. Yeah, so we'll look at a few more of these pictures on these islands, and then I'll finish up. There's always little runways on the islands to be able to access them. I think there was an interesting, yeah, here, this little runway. It's more of a, less of a formal one, no tarmac on it. I see little paths across these runways as well. It's quite interesting. Here we have some houses there, a few dwellings, a lot of palm trees. Not a lot of grass. It seems to be able to have any kind of pasture animals, so probably a lot of coconuts, things like that. Don't really know what the actual produce on the island is other than palm tree based products. But yeah, quite beautiful again, very serene. Tourism probably is also a nice income for the locals, hopefully, if it's utilized efficiently, because this is really quite beautiful and quite majestic part of the world. This is also interesting, a little lake there. Of course, you're going to want to have some form of water locally, otherwise it'd be very difficult to maintain the island. I wonder, do they have any form of wells available, considering that they are just an atoll? Hopefully they do. Again, interesting, the different houses there. And yeah, we can go a little bit further south again to the bigger part of the atoll. Just amazing, the colors. I once read a story about, you may know Biggles, the Biggles stories, and he was getting pearls from the inside of one of these atolls and nearly died doing so because of the dangerous tides. As you can see, the atoll has got these kind of breakers, and the water comes in on top of these, and if you're a boat and you don't see this, you can actually get beached and drown. So it is relatively dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. But as we read on the Wikipedia, these communities are quite experts in seafaring and have been for a very long time. So again, here we see just the beautiful images. We see the clouds. We see, again, beautiful turquoise images here, beaches and all. Yeah, I have 2 or 3 more of these. Again, I thought this one was quite nice. Here we have a runway. And again, here highlighting. So we have the runway. We have a few dwellings here. And then we have just lovely beaches and roads going to the south, down along, kind of connecting at very narrow points. A lot of these connections are happening. I kind of wonder, where's this road even going? Are there even any dwellings down here? And what's actually the aim of this road? Not entirely sure, but again, just beautiful, beautiful landscape. Probably not a lot of access to a lot of these places. But here we have got houses, so a lot of access would be by boat, because I don't think there is any actual runway on this particular part of the island. You can probably bridge that gap by foot when the water is lower, but again, probably is a bit risky if you don't know what you're doing. Good, yeah, I think that was all I wanted to really show you, that this region in the middle of the Pacific, one of the most beautiful island nations, but trying to raise awareness about the fact that they will probably be underwater. A lot of them, we mightn't even get to see these in our own lifetimes. Even if you wanted to travel to these and had the money to go travel to these amazing places, they mightn't actually exist in the future.